So, for those of you all that are joining us, we want to welcome you again to our Lansing People's Assembly. And this is being recorded so that you might go back and share it. And here are our sponsors. You can follow us on Lansing People's Assembly on .org. And we also have a Lansing People's Assembly Facebook page that we invite you to go and check out. We also want you to check out these Facebook pages as well. There are a lot of events that are coming up around racial equity and justice and community service. So please, with these sponsors, please check out and follow them on Facebook. And if you like YouTube as well, you can follow them on YouTube as well. We're going to jump right in because we've got a pretty big conversation that we're going to have today. Again, my name is Sean Holland, aka Mordecai, and I am with the One Love Global team, one of the sponsors. Here, I am also joined with our CEO, Angela Waters Austin. Angela, let's give you space for a shout out. She gives us a hand wave, and we're also
hello, everybody. I have to find my button. Hey, People's Assembly.
Hey, you see Commissioner Adams is waving at you from the west side.
Hello, Keeper. I love Benton Harbor. Come and hang out with us.
And we also have Jordan. She will be providing tech support. And so you can see right before her name, there's an asterisk. So Jordan, would you like to give him a shout out?
Hello, everyone. Feel free to DM me if there's any difficulties with anything.
All right. Thank you so much. So again, we welcome you. Now, our purpose today, we're going to look at the new municipal or city budget that the Mayor Andy Shore has proposed. And so we've been talking for the last year about participatory budgeting. We had looked at the prior year's budget and we laid out some priorities. And so we're going to really dig into that. Please check the comment section because there's going to be some links that we're going to place in the comment section for you to open up the budget as well as the document. And so our road that we're going to kind of travel on is we're going to talk a little bit about that. We'll have our grounding and remind us about the Lansing Breathe Act, and then we'll have some working groups, and we'll end our time today with what's next and some announcements. So again, I will be your moderator, and Angela and I, and then we've got Jordan as your tech support, and we have those who will also be facilitating the group discussions when we get into our breakout sessions. What is the People's Assembly? Again, we review this each month, an ongoing process and dedicated space where the community gathers and we set our own priorities. It is co-governed. Again, no organization, not one organization owns this space. We center our conversations and the lens is always centered on those who are directly impacted by the discussion, right? And if it's a policy, if it's an initiative, we center those discussions around those who are directly impacted. We build our vision and priorities together, and we hold ourselves and elected officials accountable, right? We take action and we deliver results. So it is in this space where we come together and ask, okay, what are the community's priorities? This is where your voice matters and you weigh in. Because what we have seen over the last year is the exact opposite. Our current administration has not engaged in conversations with this assembly. This is a diverse assembly of Metro Lansing citizens who have been gathering around safety, around budget, around all of the various issues that we have determined are important for this community. And yet there's been no conversation, no initiation by the Shore administration. And so what we want to dig into now and to look at the budget that was presented. When we talk about the beloved community, what is our goal? What's the not necessarily the utopic kind of goal, but what are we aiming for? Wouldn't it be nice to live in a community where the conditions that create crime and violence are no longer present? Right? I mean, wouldn't that be just, I mean, think about that. If that's something that you would love, put a thumbs up or show an emoji on your screen as we go through these together. A heart, thumbs up on your screen. Yep. And again, the outcomes can no longer be predicted by race. We've talked about the inequalities and the disparities, whether it be health, whether it be economic, education, and they exist heavily within our community. For every $1 that white citizens make, Black citizens make 60%. We know that prosecutions are down 20%, but yet African Americans make up 54% of those prosecuted. Come on, assembly. And we could go on and on and on, from housing to graduation rates, from health care. We can go on and on and on. And so that number 2 outcome is huge. Number 3, what would it look like to be in a community where racial hierarchy is no longer the norm? The reason why our current administration can do and act and do the things is because we're trying to dismantle. This is our goal: dismantle racial hierarchy and systems of oppression where everyone feels welcome and everyone feels safe. Believe it or not, folks, there is a gang of people in our community that when they are faced with a harm or a danger, they do not call the police. And I've told many stories, right? And so again, we have many people in our community that when they feel sick, their first call is not to call the doctor, because we know we have inequities in healthcare and in those systems. And so that's why we've gathered today. And I want to just, again, ground us that the lens, we always center our discussions and our thoughts on those who are the most impacted. So think about that as we move forward. What were our priorities that we set months and months and months ago? We said that, number 1, we felt that in this community, what we needed was to defund the police and invest. You don't take money away and throw it away. This was about defund and invest money in community organizations. Is that too much to ask? This is what the collective group, right? This was our number 1 priority, and it was based around safety. Number 2, to ensure livable wages for all, to meet basic needs without worry. And then the third priority, to divert funds to community programs and mental health help, and for preventative measures. So these were our priorities. We always like to ground on these. And this is really about, how we saw safety. This is what we said community safety looks like. And so again, if this resonates with you, then put a heart or an emoji up on that screen so we can continue to move forward in solidarity. And it's amazing how in our political climate, Angela, is that these 3 issues seemingly are a stretch, that it's too much to ask, right? But we are not asking, we are demanding with this assembly. One of the ways that we have all come together to say, how can we move these priorities forward, is through the Breathe Act. We have said this is the civil rights legislation of our time. And we see what has happened with the Voting Rights Act and the rolling back and the Civil Rights Act. We've seen all of the measures since the signing of those particular bills, right, or acts. And so we now have new concerns. We have, fresh issues in our community. So this visionary bill divests our taxpayer dollars from brutal and discriminatory policies and invests in a new vision of public safety, a vision that answers the call to defund the police and allows all communities to finally breathe. How many of y'all have seen some of the new videos that have been released from 2019, where Angela, you can help me with this, but where there were Black men who were their families were told originally that they had a car accident, and now the truth, people have leaked the video, and they were tased and drugged and dragged, and beaten by the cops and literally killed. And people have leaked the videos from inside of the police force. Even this week or the prior week here in our own city, where there were text messages that were sent between police officers and derogatory racist comments. And one of our police officers was, fired as a result. So again, what we're talking about is just a new vision of what does it mean to be really an American and live together. This is the legislation. And many of you all have signed up to be a Breathe Act sponsor. And we want to thank you for that. And we'll put the link up on those of you who haven't on how you can become a Breathe Act sponsor. Last thing I'll say about this is that this is comprehensive. This is across the board, and this deals with education, this deals with environmental, this deals with electoral, this deals with healthcare. So this is a comprehensive piece of legislation, and those who are well versed in these issues and in writing policy have put a lot of work into giving us this. Our goal was to put together a Lansing Breathe Act, and that's why we're continuing to have this conversation, our grounding. So where are we going? So for the spring and summer, as we go into our elections, we're developing a beloved community people's budget, and that's what we're going to engage you in today. What does and that was something that we had asked as we were preparing for this. Is there an example of a municipal budget that expresses racial equity and justice? Is there an example? Is there a template in the country, right, that we could look at, that this is what a racial equity budget looks like for a city? Doesn't exist. And so we have the opportunity to actually build that on today and to fold that into our discussion. So developing a beloved community budget, secure Breathe community co-sponsors, spread truth in wake of the election. So now that COVID is beginning to lift, we have many in our community who are saying, hey, Sean, I've been bunkered in. What's going on in our community? People need to know what happened to Anthony Hulon. People need to know about the Divine Nine. They need to know about the Back 40. They need to know about what has happened in our community with our BIPOC citizens as it relates to COVID-19 and healthcare. Why did the Ingham County Healthcare declare racism a public health pandemic? Why did they do that? And so people are asking, what's going on with the Shore administration? Why do we have all of these city employees that have a civil suit and a racial civil suit against the city? What's going on in our city? And so we're going to spread the truth in the wake of the election and assembly at the city hall. COVID made us go virtual, but guess what, folks? We're moving out. So we're going to take our assemblies to city hall and create outreach materials to engage more community in this process. And then for the fall, get out the vote and influence the fall budget cycle. That's our roadmap. That's where we're going. Thumbs up, hearts, if my voice is coming across clearly and understandable. We're trucking along, people. I'm trying to keep my composure because I get so excited about this. Now, here's what we're going to engage you in today, and we want you to take a good long look at these graphs. Now, I'm going to ask Jordan, if you go to the presentation in the notes section, there's a link to the narrative that the mayor put out. This is the graph, but there's a narrative portion that I would like to show you. So if we look at this budget now, we looked at this last year. Notice the difference. So let's just look at this. We had been calling for defunding the police. We had been calling for more money to be put back into the community for economic development, community development, recreation, mental health services, et cetera, et cetera. So when we look at this budget, the 2021 and 2022, it appears from 2020 to 2021, there's been a reduction due to COVID. So we went from $229 million to $151 million roughly. But when you look at the $151 million, we see that 30% of the city's budget, according to what our mayor just released, goes to fire and police. But then you have another 31% to retirement, or probably legacy costs, and fixed benefits. So you have here 60% of the city's budget right off the bat goes to police, fire, and retirement. And then we've got this general bucket over here, which takes us to 70% of the city's budget goes now to general government. So you got 10% to general government, and everything from general government counterclockwise through retirement. That's 70% of the city budget. Now we've got a new category here, 3% to fleet management. What do we own? Airplanes? Do we own what fleet are we talking about that now has to be added to the city budget? Information technology, another 4. So we're at 77%. So again, we're going to ask you to go into your breakout sessions. Is this what we asked for? Absolutely not. We did not ask for a budget that 70% goes to running the house before it even goes out to the community. So again, these are some things that we want you to look at. We're going to provide the link where you can look at this. Now, Angela, let me ask you this question here, because I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Let's see if I can do this right quick. I want to show you all something here that I think is important. I'm going to share. Let me go back because I want to show you this. Let's see here. So I'm going to pull up the narrative portion of the budget so you can see it. There we go. So I'm going to share my screen now. And I want to show you something, because what we were asking for, your voice matters. So you all can see my screen now, right? Can you see my screen? All right, so I blew it up. So I'm going to go here to public safety. Now, this is the narrative portion that we've put inside of the chat box for you to pull up as well. We had talked about defunding the police. We had talked about adding, additional funds for public safety. And we look here in the narrative portion for public safety, we've added a social worker. Remember, we talked about that. That was something that we said we needed. So the mayor says, oh yeah, what we're going to do is add a social worker. But there's been no conversation between this assembly and the administration. There's been no accountability at all. You all have been on the council meetings. You've been in the public comment section. You've been very vocal, but yet there's been no conversation. What we wanted to point out with the narrative section here, how important your voice has been over the last year. So he says, we've added a social worker and an FOI and an analyst to provide additional community support and improve transparency for our police department. You all made that happen. We also are adding Ingham County community health workers to work with fire dispatch to ensure non-emergency calls go towards social services. This is what you all said. Then he goes on to say, my budget recommendation also includes important public safety equipment and infrastructure funding, including finalization of improvements of city sirens and audio visual upgrades for our emergency operations. We're going to ask you today, are we getting what we asked for and what we demanded as a community? We cannot let this administration just continue to make changes and do what they want to do without any. Why won't you talk to the citizens who have elected you? It's the most phenomenal thing I've ever experienced in this city. But then infrastructure and equipment. I am pleased to present a budget that contains $2.7 million for major street and bridge, $1.8 million for local streets, and $225 for new sidewalks, etc., etc. As with each of my budgets, 100% of the city road sidewalk millage is proposed to be used for the projects. So again, did we ask for this? Not saying we don't need it, but did we ask, is this the proper allocation of a budget that reflects a priority of racial equity and safety in the city? Let me move on, because I'm going to show you this portion here, because this is absolutely amazing. He says, in addressing racial justice and equity, the proposed 2022 budget includes 135 towards addressing racism and promoting racial equity pursuant to the recent changes to the Basic Human Services Ordinance. Raise your hand if you know exactly what that is. What the heck is that? What did that initiate, right? What has this become the impetus for? We have a lot of questions. We are also putting $300,000 toward racial justice training, equity assessments, and facilitating a citywide equity committee as requested by the Mayor's Racial Justice and Equity Alliance. Did we ask? So where are you getting the $435,000, right? Where is that reflected in the budget? And it goes on to say, I don't have to read this to you. You can read it on your own as you get into your chat. But I wanted to show you the graph and what it appears as if when we look at the graph portion, I'm going to try to blow this up again. When we look at the graph portion, it appears as if things have been moved around to appear as if the city police department has been defunded. But we know that is not true. Angela, as you look at this graph, what comes to mind before we kind of open it up for some discussion here? Let's see how many people we have on. We've got 18 people on. So what comes to mind when you look at how, our voices, as we have spoken, the mayor has responded, right? And now we're at this new place. So what comes to mind?
What comes to mind, especially when I see Peggy Roberts here with us today, is that this is not a new conversation. I remember distinctly sitting down with Peggy and her inviting me to co-chair the Power of We Consortium with Vincent Delgado, and us putting our heads together and making a commitment and a declaration that racial equity would be a priority for our community. And we did. I mean, it wasn't well received by everyone, especially people who should be deeply invested in in improving our community and having racially equitable outcomes. So this is what we've always done. This is the work that we do. And so while racial equity is a new conversation for this administration, when I see this, what it says to me, because I know I know how long it took for us to get here, is that there would be no line item in the budget for anything about racial equity if we had not continued to do this work for more than a decade. And so it's a response. It's a reaction to the community. It is not actually working with the community. And when we create a space like Lansing People's Assembly and we invite our elected officials, when we invite anyone in our community to be a part of this process and they fail to show up, that means that there really isn't any interest in hearing from the community. That means that we have a mayor who believes that his perspective of what the community needs is what should be the priority. Now, we saw that he formed an alliance that signed non-disclosure agreements, that's been doing all of their work behind closed doors, where they decide what racial equity should look like, and then they present it to the community. I'll just say what I see is that that's not racial equity. That's not how racial equity practices. And the serious commitment to actually creating a budget that is moral and just actually has to happen with the community. So we're in a position where we're trying to interpret what is presented in the budget because there is no accountability. So for me, absolutely, I see that there's changes. Changes are not transformation. Changes are not racial equity, and changes can be quite deceptive. And it's up to us as a community to really take a look at this and to really process and formulate questions that actually lead to accountability. Because Black Lives Matter has had candidate events, and the mayor has declined to participate in those events. He's taken the position that because of the racial discrimination lawsuits, that he has been advised by legal that he can't participate. Peter Spotiffer said the same thing. I'm not sure why, since none of those lawsuits name him in them as far as I know. But there's clearly a lack of will to be accountable to the community. So when I see this budget and I hear what it sounds like to me is like, look, we put this money in here, now you should be satisfied. We gave you what you asked for, now go away and be quiet. Because what it's done, like they do just enough to silence us. But the bottom line is this budget going to actually have a material change in anybody's life? Is it actually going to move the needle on youth arrests? Will youth continue to be 70% of arrests and 20% of our community? Black youth in particular. So there is nothing in this budget that says this is how we're going to address this problem, because police is still the biggest piece of the pie. No matter how you slice it, no matter how you dice it, no matter how you move it around, 26.5 million dollars went to police and 3 million in community. But I'm going to let you all go and explore that and sit with this the way that Mordecai and have had a chance to sit with it and to be troubled by it, and we should be troubled by it. So I'll just say that. So as much as the narrative and the optics are about, look at what we did that you asked us to do, that's not how relationships work. That's not how accountability works. And I'm just grateful that we're here and that we can actually create what we need for our community. And we're preparing for a new administration that actually understands and is willing to work with the budget. So I just want you to know that we set out on this journey with full knowledge that this is what the budget was going to look like. We got exactly what we expected from this mayor.
And the thing that is also shocking here is the fact that we want you to begin to think about when we call our meeting with the mayor, what are the fundamental questions? What are those guiding questions that we would ask our mayor based upon our analysis of the budget and the narrative, right? So the question that I would have is, Angela, this is the thing that I'm stunned. Where's the $435,000 reflected in this budget? Is it in general government? It can't be in fire. It can't be. Is it sprinkled throughout fire and police? Is it information technology? Where's the 435? But as you continue to read the narrative, what the mayor has made very clear is that the federal funding is the subsidy that helped the city come out of the hole. So where the thanks should be is at the federal level. Because when we didn't have the federal funding, we were asking our mayor to share, to think more creatively on how we take care of the community. How can we come together? This is a small city. This isn't New York. And he basically said, we don't have enough money. We don't have enough money. What we're going to do is do what we always do. And you guys figure it out. So it was very frustrating to hear him come back on and say, hey, I'm going to put money back in on my brother's keeper. I'm going to no, you're not giving us anything. The thanks should be to our federal representatives, our state legislators and folks who allocate for us and represent us on the federal level. And again, you can't say, because I got federal money, now I'm going to take care of the community. That is, to me, that's problematic on so many different levels. And we should not let this mayor off the hook with this propaganda that's constantly being fed us from the mayor's office, the administration, as well as the council. We should not let any person off. And I've seen it in the comment section. We deserve better than what we're seeing and what we're getting. Let me move on, because Angela, I'm gonna be heated and I'm gonna keep moving it. Now, let's look at this. We're creating a Lansing People's Budget, and so here, a people's budget is a form of participatory budgeting that puts residents in charge of how the city spends its money. Believe it or not, we are in charge. What do we need? What must be divested from and what must be invested in? And who are the leaders who can help us get there, basically, who can get us there? And the fourth one that I would add would be, what questions, when we call our When we get to City Hall and we demand a meeting with the mayor as residents of the city, what are those questions that come when you analyze the budget and the narrative? What are those questions so we can have our questions? The mayor can run from movement work in the city, BLM and Lansing for Black Lives. He can run, but he can't run from the citizens. He can't run from the People's Assembly. And so, what are those questions? So, we're going to put these in the comment section. I'm going to ask Jordan if she would break us up. You got us ready. So, these are your questions, and you will have an hour. It is now 2:33, and you will have 1 hour to go through these questions and then develop other questions that you have about the budget. And because there's just no accountability here, none at all. If there was, I would say it, but there isn't. And so, again, Angela, any other instructions before we head off?
No, I mean, we have brilliant people here, and I'm excited to see where your conversations lead.
There is one question about, are we breaking into our Breathe Act groups? And I thought we said we would just break out. I thought we said we would just have our regular breakout sessions and not break out in our Breathe Act groups. Is that correct?
Yes, let's break out in general groups, and you should be having this conversation with the section of the Breathe Act that you committed to in mind as you think about what a budget needs to look like for the work that you're going to be doing in that group, so that we properly fund the areas that we're going to be working on in the Breathe Act.
All right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to stop sharing here. And let's go through our community agreements before we let you out. Jordan, would you mind reading this for us, please?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
So as a member and or supporter of the Lansing community today, we agree to make a conscious commitment to honor the following agreements. Number one, respect. Respect the rights of others to hold opinions and beliefs that differ from your own. When you disagree, challenge the critic, or criticize the idea and not the person. 2, affect. Practice intentional listening. Let your comments, requests for clarification, critiques, and so on reflect that you have paid attention to the comments made by the person who spoke before you. 3, inclusion. Take space and make space. Be mindful of others. Share responsibly. If you have much to say, try and hold back a bit. And if you are hesitant to speak, look for opportunities to contribute to the discussion. Number 4, grace. Recognize that we are all still learning. Be willing to change your perspective and make space for others to do the same. And finally, 5, sanctuary. Create a safe space for sharing. Keep personal stories that people share confidential. And we're hoping that everyone is always guided by and offer contributions that are rooted in and come from our desire to improve our beloved community of Lansing.
All right, so I'm going to stop share, and you should see a button that appear on your screen to invite you to go to your breakout sessions. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you after the breakout sessions.
Supporting good candidates, even though that takes a lot of time, and helping them get the talking points that we want them to have. And even if they don't win all the time, like, people still start talking about it. Yeah, I don't know. And I try to keep that brief, but if anybody else wants to add anything else that I might not have written down or said out loud, please let me know. That would be fantastic. Or not let me know, let everybody know. Yeah.
Thanks, Ash.
Great summary.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Anyone else from group 1? Group 2? Group 2? Group 2? Can you hear me? Can you not hear me?
You're pretty quiet.
Group 2, we're calling on numero dos.
I can speak. I'm just really good at trying to wait for other people to go if they want to.
Oh, okay. I thought it was just my mic. Y'all tried to play like it was my microphone. I see. Well, it was more than a mic issue.
It was quiet, and then I just had to unmute myself. So I don't have my notes in front of me anymore, but I did take notes, so it's in my brain a little more. So group 2 was awesome. We talked a lot about, I think it was a good vent session, but also with good purpose, that we were talking about where we can send our funds and how we really need to bring a lot of that back to the wisdom of the communities that we have here already, that the communities that are here and are doing the work are really best suited to help serve Lansing. So one of the ideas brought up would be like having just those people at the table when it comes to working on our budget, and really speaking to what we have and what we can use, and moving also those communities moving together to use money and resources that we have that's separate from city government, since we can't necessarily count on those types of grants to be doing the work that we need to do. We talked about some of the candidates that we have coming up for election and who was a better representation of the goals that have been put forth by the assembly, and who those people are and who we want to see in that seat. We talked a lot about, I think, just the way that things look on paper versus how it's actually operating, and sort of the ways that city council has been complicit in ignoring us, basically, and our wants and needs. I don't know, that was a lot of it. Does anybody else want to hop in? Is there something that's not coming to mind?
I think Erica pointed out the importance of talking in language that people understand when we're trying to convince people or put across a point of view. I thought that was a really important point.
Yeah, we kind of had the same discussion in our smaller group, was the whole co-opting of the whole reimagining theme, where we've been talking about reimagining public safety, and what they're trying to put in the community is our discussion has been limited to reimagining police. We've been having a much broader discussion, reimagining public safety, where police is an aspect of it, right? And so I think, being very intentional to clarify that, and not allow what we've been discussing and breaking out to be co-opted by those who do not seek transformation, to say, oh, all they're talking about is reimagining police. And so, no, we're talking about something that is much more embracive and inclusive of all citizens, right? Even though the lens is still focused on our BIPOC citizens. But when we talk about reimagining public safety, that is going to hit every citizen. And so again, I think it's very important that we don't let them pull us down, that's all we're thinking about. We're not no, we're talking about a beloved community, right? And so again, I really like that point, and wanted to certainly make that clarification. But again, we have power. Our voices, our collective voices, it has power. And so don't underestimate. And that's one of the questions I want to ask you is, how do we elevate, the one voice of the People's Assembly? Because if you can silence your enemy, right, then you're just going to keep going and doing the thing that you're doing. But again, we can elevate the voice of the People's Assembly. So I do like making sure we've got a group of people who are ready to speak, right? Who have practiced, know exactly what the issues are. That's just how we organize, right? It's just that important. Anyone else have any thoughts?
I just wanted to share, bouncing off what you were saying about our voices have power. I know, somebody in our group said that like at the Lansing level through this budget process, Linda Keefe said that that's how we were able to get a sustainability manager in Lansing. So that's already one success we can point to. And I just moved from Miami a few years ago, and we went through a similar process with our climate justice group. And we previously in frickin' Miami had no money set aside for climate resilience. And we got like 300,000 set aside through the budget process for climate resilience. So it's definitely possible. Like I wanted to point out that like optimism, like you're saying, like we can do this. We create the will.
Yep. You know, as a political science major, you know, one of the things that, you know, we have much discussion about is who controls the hedge, right? You know, how do you move the hegemonical forces within a nation or a state or a city? And if the elected officials can keep the people quiet, then they run another agenda. It's when you decide we don't want to go that way, we want to go another way, and you raise your voices and you come together, guess what? Things begin to change. But what they teach us in these classes is that what Americans want is to be told that everything is okay, right? If you tell Americans that everything is okay, we've got it under control, then they will be lulled back to sleep. And so when a minority community stands up and says, hey, time out, there's a problem in the community, everyone else is asleep. So now we got to wake everybody up, right? And so while we're trying to wake everybody up, right, then they shift the agenda. We were talking, for example, how we had all of the protests last summer. Now they're making moves to pass legislation where it is illegal to protest, right? So again, just think about how we have that collective power. And so I don't want us to think that this is, you know, an entirely uphill kind of battle. We're already at the top of the hill, and we're just going to just make it really tight. We just need to make it really tight in this city to be an elected official and be unaccountable. It's just really tight. You're not going to be, doesn't matter. And the last thing I'll say is that when you look at that budget, there are other organizations that we all are part of. And most organizations that are dying are top heavy on facilities, right? And when you look at that budget says we spend 70+% just taking care of the house, not the people of the house. You cannot be a leading city moving into this future without thinking differently. It's not going to happen. And so this is an important process. And we definitely need to continue along the path. And I want to thank you all for just everyone for, you know, dedicating and committing to this process. And, you know, we're gonna be accountable to you all to raise the voice of the People's Assembly, TRHT, and all the other things that each of you all are a part of. So we do have anyone have any closing comments before we give you some super important announcements and how you can register for the next assembly? Anyone else? We built this city. That's the song that came to my mind. We built this city on rock and roll. You know what I mean? Like, this is our city. And so let's look here. I'm going to share my screen and we'll finish for today. So when we look, the next assembly is June 26th at 2 o'clock. And so we want to make sure that you register for that. You know, we've got the QR code right there. You can put your phone up on the screen and register. Okay. So that's June 26th, 2 to 4. The other event that we want to make sure that you register for today, if you all could do us a favor and register for today. And if you want to be a Breathe Act sponsor, many of you have already signed on as a sponsor, but if you have not signed on as a sponsor, please pull out your phone, put it up to the computer screen, and you will be automatically directed over to the co-sponsorship page. So I'll give you a second to do that. Take out your camera on your phone and sign up to be a co-sponsor for an individual or for an organization. Jordan, you have anything to say about this?
Send it on to someone you know. Send it on to someone you know. Think about the relationships that you hold with people and organizations, and feel free to send it on to them too. We know how powerful the Breathe Act is. I mean, we've talked about it a lot in this space, but think about how transformative that could be on a state level too.
Yeah, and I think it's important to also, we continue to make this to differentiate between the Breathe Act and its comprehensive nature versus the George Floyd Policing Act, right? And so you hear a lot of talk about the George Floyd Policing Act. What we're talking about is something much broader than that. So again, please continue to dive into the Breathe Act. On June 4th, we're having our My Brother's Keeper and our Girls Equity Network relaunch. This was one of the programs that helped support Black youth from kindergarten all the way to workforce placement, right? And this was one of the programs that the mayor defunded. And so again, this is part of the reason why we're having this discussion about the budget. Now, if you notice, if you go on Facebook and read what the mayor put out, one of the things that he said was, I'm going to put money back into My Brother's Keeper because he defunded it. And so when we talk about the milestones, right, when we look at, every summer, there's something like 20 to 30,000 unemployed youth in the city of Detroit alone. And so we're talking about building a statewide and a local network that supports BIPOC youth from kindergarten to early learning to third grade literacy to middle school to high school transition to high school graduation to college placement and job placement, right? Keeping them from falling through the cracks due to the systems that are in place. And so we are convening and we're calling all of our MBK partners. If you are a mentor, if you are part of racial equity and justice work, you need to be in the room. This will be a virtual conference. It will start at 10 and there'll be 2 sessions, 10 to noon. And then the afternoon session will start at 1 to 4. We have youth that will be sitting on panels and we'll be asking them questions about reimagining public safety. How has it been for youth over the last year during COVID being virtual? There were many students that the school system, they didn't show up for. We don't really know what's going to come back in August in our Michigan schools. And so if the system was broken before COVID, you can imagine what it's going to be like when the students go back. So again, this is our Black Renaissance COVID era summit. And again, if you are doing any type of racial equity work and justice work, you want to be a part of this conference. Some amazing speakers that will empower and educate and will get perspective from our youth. We also have Freedom Summer. This is, and I'm going to ask Jordan to jump in here. Jordan is a part of the planning for Freedom Summer, but this is based upon, our Fannie Lou Hamer and the Freedom Summer in Mississippi, 1964-65. And this is our youth empowerment and teaching youth how to organize themselves. And this happens every single summer. Jordan, you want to kind of chime in here and add some granularity on this?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the quick explanation is just that Freedom Summer is an 8-week experience designed for Black young people ages 12 to 25 all across the state of Michigan to come together and learn the skills of organizing and to put them into practice. And the curriculum is designed around love, learning, and action, knowing that healing is central to this work and keeps us grounded, and learning, again, all those skills for community organizing and also learning from each other. Because I mean, last summer, one of the great takeaways on Love Day, we had some alumni come back and reflect on their experiences. And it was just so powerful to hear how they were making connections across their different communities about the same sorts of problems that they were facing, and how they they're in their own ways pushing back against those things and being able to leverage those different skills in different places. And action is the third component of Freedom Summer, actually getting to put some of these things into effect, designing their own organizing projects and campaigns with the support to complete them. So definitely send this on to somebody who you think would be a good fit for the program, and yeah, share the word.
Yeah, and so again, please share the word. How many slots do we have open this year?
Applications are being accepted on a rolling basis. Ooh, I think there is probably so we have 40 total, and I think we're about at 25 right now. And applications close on June 20th. So you've got some time.
Thank you, Jordan. And here's our upcoming election dates and deadlines. I'm going to turn it back over to Angela for any closing comments before we sign off for today. Thank you for your time today, Angela.
Thank you, Mordecai, and everyone for your work today. We look forward to actually getting deeper, and our goal is to ultimately have a budget that reflects a Lansing Breathe Act. What does our pie actually need to look like to support all of the the infrastructure that needs to be built, the investments that need to be in the community. So as you're thinking about the section of the Breathe Act that you're working on, again, what does that pie really need to look like to make sure that our people have what they need? And thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.